Morning, everyone, and welcome to our first talk for the day. This talk is powered by the Department of Tourism and ADEX. ADEX is considered one of the longest and biggest dive shows in the world, so it's very exciting that we have them focusing on the Philippines right now. Our first topic will actually be something that's very close to our hearts. We are going to be talking about shark conservation in the Philippines. I think we all know about the issue that's happening. About hundreds of and millions of sharks are being slaughtered each year. And in the Philippines, majority of these vulnerable and very rare species are found here. And we have three experts that will tell us more about what's happening in the Philippines, and more importantly, how we can be a part and help in the conservation of these creatures. Our first speaker is the founder of Shark Education. So without further ado, let me welcome Stephen Surina. Hello, Stephen.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Yes. So I think you have a presentation ready for us.
Yeah. I'm going to play it right now.
Okay. Thank you. If I may ask, where are you based in the Philippines right now, or outside the Philippines?
No, I'm in France. It's actually 3 a.m.
Oh wow! So thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, we're very lucky to have him here today with us. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So the topic of today is talking about the sharks conservation, as you mentioned, but with shark education, as we are based in 27 different locations worldwide. I'm going to speak more about first what we're doing with shark education, what is it made of, and what we work, what are we doing in the world of sharks conservation. And then I'm going to talk more specifically about what we're trying to do in the Philippines. So first of all, Shark Education is a shark diving operators that works with in 17 different sharks destinations. We are training scuba divers how to interact with 27 different shark species. And our aim is to conservation through interactions and education. Basically, what we're doing is we take scuba divers that have no experiences with sharks, and we'd like to introduce them to shark interaction. Seeing a shark, it's good. Scuba diving with a shark, it's different. And we do believe that the experience that they are going to have while they dive with sharks is going to lead them to go further through sharks conservation and spread the word worldwide. We are also the founders of the first international charters of responsible shark ecotourism, helped by the French Historical Museum of Paris. We are also running projects and monitoring sharks population in 4 different locations, and we do promote a lot shark ecotourism. And with all of our actions, I'd like to show you a little video about shark education concept, just to make you understand a little more about what we're doing. So here was a short video of what we're doing. And now we're going to talk a little more about what we try to do in the Philippines. So there is a lot to say about sharks in the Philippines, actually. And I've decided to talk to you today about what we're doing in Malapascua, because thanks to the Department of the Tourism of the Philippines, I've been invited there in 2015 for the first time, and I've discovered how powerful and workful was the shark ecotourism over there. And I've decided to launch one of those projects that we rule with Shark Education about monitoring the sharks population over there. And I'm going to talk to you a little more about that today. Just we're going to speak a little bit about the area, Monad Shoal, and it's not Gado Island, Monad Shoal. It's one of these places that were known to be the first sharks sanctuary in the Philippines in 2015. And this is where actually the reinforcement of the protection of these sharks took place at the very first time in the world, because there is not so many places in the world where you can actually dive with pelagic treasure sharks. And the reason why I'm also talking about this place, it's because it's also a place where there is already existing research made by Dr. Simons of the pelagic treasure sharks over there. So he done this research of the relationship the pelagic treasure sharks has with the cleaner fish, also how they hunt. And his last paper in 2018 talks about the risk and resilience of high stacks for sharks making trans-jurisdictional movements to use the conservation area. And the highlights actually of this paper shows like the two last points: sharks cross jurisdictions where fisheries are valued over tourism on a daily basis, and the interest group priorities must be reconciled to manage and protect the species. So this is quite special because elsewhere we have been able to, for example, in the Bahamas, dive with sharks. The sharks there are fully protected, but from an island to another, the laws remains the same. And when I've read this article, I was quite surprised that from an island to another, actually the laws are not the same. And this is also more about that we're going to talk, and about actually citizen science for conservation. Shark Education could not write papers for now because I'm still a PhD student, but we do work through citizen science. And we believe strongly that this is one of the ways that we can also give our knowledge to science and a better conservation. So citizen science, just to remind people that are not very aware of what citizen science is the scientific research conducted by amateurs or non-professional scientists. Basically, you don't need to be a 4 years old, a 4-year school master's or a PhD student to be able to rule to be able to follow some scientist project. So everybody can actually follow it instead of having some good methods. So you have to be some good methods to be able to provide some good information about what you're doing. And basically, there's also existing project everywhere in the world where people just come on a boat and with helped by scientists, they can actually help the science to collect data. So some existing project collects some tissues, some blood samples, some other informations. And mostly the most efficient ones, to me, actually, it's the citizen science project that led by IDE photo identification. And there is many of them that are using this type of methods, and they're actually quite powerful. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. So the photo ID, it's something that is not actually harms the shark. And it's very less expensive about what the other monitoring, for example, monitoring projects led by scientists are, because you need to have tags, you need to create missions, you need to have authorizations to be able to tag animals. So it takes lots of times to collect all those informations and to set some missions, some scientific missions. It's also for some shark species or for some other methods. It also harms the animal. So we believe that photo ID is actually quite efficient.
Steven,
And yes?
Sorry to bother you, but is it okay if you share your screen once again?
It's not shared anymore?
We lost you right after the video.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
I thought it was in.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. No, I was just like showing, like the area of monatour. And I was also talking about those papers that were published by scientists talking about what's happening out there with the treasure sharks. And the last highlights, which shows that actually treasure sharks are crossing different areas as they are migratory animals. Yes. And for some reason, actually, the laws are, from an island to another and the jurisdictions are not the same. And this is why I've started to talk about the citizen science project and the ones that are led by other scientists or by other missions worldwide. And yeah, I was just showing that here we've got different type of scientist methods that are used. Like you can, for some, you just put spaghetti tags, like the one you've got right there on the base of the dorsal fin of that whale shark. You've got also some pop-up tags, as you've got satellite tags, and those cost lots of money. They are big missions to set up. You need scientists, you need permissions most of the time, and also it harms the animals. For most of the time, it scares them away for some times, and we prefer just being like observers when we dive with these animals, scuba diving with them. So this is why we've believed that photo ID has a great chance to collect more data sometimes than the other methods, and they are harmless for animals actually. So to get like the proper right methods to photo ID a shark, we're going to focus first of all on the sex of the animals, because this is going to give you an idea of how the population is. For some people that are not aware of that, sharks population for some species are segregate. So males and female are not sharing the same environment for food competition, for mating relating reasons. But for some other species, for example, like sorry, I forgot the name, for the Lamnidae sharks, like the great whites, the mako, or the treasure sharks, we find out with thousands of hours of observations that males and female were quite actually sharing the same environment. So unlike the requiem sharks, where we mostly seeing either way females or male. So first of all, focusing on sex is helping us to see what type of population we are looking at, because if we're looking at some requiem sharks that are males and females and we got some equal rates, it means that they're here for probably mating purpose, but we need some other data to collect to make sure that actually that's the right reason. So first, for photo ID, we focus on the sex. So the sex of the sharks are located on the second, this is the pelvic fins, sorry, because in French it's not the right name. So that's on the pelvic fins. Right there on females, you've got only the cloaca. On the males, you've got the two claspers. Easy to watch for some animals. For immature animals, it's quite difficult, but with treasures, it's quite easy. As you can see, the two appendix that are going along the tail of the animal. Then it's more difficult for treasures because they don't have special colors nor lines. They're more shiny. They don't share those spots like the white tip reef sharks does. They're more like the silky sharks, for instance, because they don't have marks that can help us to say, oh, this is that animal or that's another one. Then we've got scars, cut, nicks, and marks. So also, actually, treasure sharks do not have many scars, as they are quite fearful and scared animals. So they try not to venture into some words where they put themselves into danger. And then we may have more distinctive marks or special features that may help us as well to recognize and monitor the right animal that we're seeing. And actually, this is not very complicated, because the only necessary equipment is a camera. You can do it with a GoPro, and you need a computer. So as long as you got the shark in the frame, you just take a picture. You can take also videos, and then You're gonna have a long debriefing to see what animal you've got. Better you've got two sides, but for some animals it's quite difficult because you only see them passing through you only once. So it's better when you get the two sides of the animals, but it's never easy. So this is the only necessary equipment that you need to do good photo ID methods for citizen science. And the interest actually of those methods is because it promotes the educations of scuba diving communities and scientist knowledge, and reduces the cost of research, as I said, because actually you only need a camera and a computer to actually proceed to it. It's less expensive than any other scientific missions because it doesn't need to set big groups, to bring scientists for everywhere, to hire boats and everything, because each dive operators can actually do that if they brief their customers properly. It's very efficient in a way to assess population and quantify the shark that are locally observed. It's less aggressive than the traditional methods used by science: capture, fishing, tagging, installing, for example, internal tags. With time, daily research brings more data than tag results, because a tag, for example, can bring informations up to 3, 4, 5 months if it stays attached to the animal, which is not the case when you take pictures every day on the reef for as long as you want, actually. And then it contributes directly to science and conservation, because all the data that are collected by those diving operators or every customers that decided to help science can be just sent and help actually the scientists that are in charge of any programs concerned any area or any shark species. The only limits that we've got with those photo identification methods, it's because it's only reliable on the monitoring on the obtained results, and also because the shark has to be seen by the scuba divers. So actually it can be in the area, but you're not seeing it. It doesn't mean that there is no sharks. It just means that you don't see it. With normal tags, actually, if there is a beacon, or if you got something elsewhere that can actually get the information, it will get it, even if the divers are not seeing it. So this is the limits of those photo IDs. But the aim of the studies is to create a reliable database with serious monitoring program involved. It can estimate the quantity of shark in the area, and this is something that we're going to talk a little bit further. It demonstrates also that there is a resident population regular to the site. So this is more specifically about Malapascua now, about Manachor. It also helped to know at which frequency each individual used the cleaning station, to know the horizontal movements, the territoriality, and the favorite habitats of each individuals, to understand better their behavior, and also to evaluate any factor favorizing, like water temperature, season, lunar cycle, and so on. Also, because I'm not the only one that started that in Malapascua, SharkLink, helped by the Treasure Shark project and conservation, has already used this type of methods since 2015. They've reached quite very impressive data, as they've been recording over thousands of sharks observed into 5 years. They've also been able to see that there were change of observation according to each season they were seeing it. And they may also be able to witness that they were quite equal some years, quantity of male and female, and some others you got more male, less females, and so on. But what we've decided to do more with shark education is what we do in the other 3 locations where we're monitoring the sharks population, is that we're more focusing on sharks, individual sharks' personalities. And to do so, we need to collect all the data that required to say that's shark number 1, this is female number 17, this is male number 102. And to do that, we need to collect as much pictures as possible to make sure that we've got one photo ID of the shark, and this is that animal. So compared to the previous studies that were made by SharkLink, actually when they see a shark, they count it for 1, but they're not counting it for 1 individual. So you can actually may see the same shark for 5 days, but you count 5 observations, which is actually 1 shark that you're seeing. So this is one of the example that we've did with the bull sharks in Playa del Carmen. So we've monitored the 48 female that come across the place every year since now more than 12 years. And this is a part of my PhD that I'm doing right now. I'm working on the oceanic white-tip reef sharks, the oceanic white-tip sharks of the Egyptian Red Sea. And we've recorded over 455 individuals. And when we start talking about individuals, what's interesting is that you're not talking about just shark. You're talking about like an animal, a living things that have a personality, and this is the new key. And there is more and more research on sharks actually right now that are talking about sharks' personality, because they do believe that sharks get their own temper, and some of them may be more inquisitive than others, like human, like dogs, like cats or horses. But with treasure shark, it's pretty complicated to make like a proper photo ID of one individuals, because as I mentioned previously, they don't have many marks, no scars, no dots like other sharks do. So we're gonna first focus, like I said, on the sex. So here you've got the claspers of a male. So you may see that the claspers are not as big and easy to see as they are on some other species. And there are the cloacas of females. So the size of the claspers will actually help us to understand, to know if sharks are mature or not. But also the size of a shark matters, because the mature sexuality of treasure shark, of pelagic treasure shark, are known to be over, for males and female, over 2.5 meters. So each individuals that are recorded longer than that were known to be mature sexually. So we're gonna focus on the sex first of all, and then some sharks get those features where you can see they've got the bent first dorsal fin. Some others get scratch or snatch on the tail. So this is one of the first examples. This is like an example of some individuals that we've recorded in Malapascua. Actually, when you speak to the locals, dive masters there, they're going to tell you that there is only one shark that got that first dorsal fin, which is bent, which is actually untrue. Over the 100 shark individuals that we've recorded there is 19 sharks that got that special features. So it's not because you're seeing a treasure shark with a bent dorsal fin that actually it's the same animals. So there you can see that for some it's very complicated, because except their body shape, which can be quite bold, because they reach their maximum size. They've got no marks, nothing. And for some others, they've got some scars or some hooks and some lines that are attached to them that from year to another can disappear and vanish, because sharks can heal very well. So it's very complicated on treasure sharks to actually get a proper photo ID of each individuals. But we've managed, with the help of two local dive centers, Fun and Sun Dive and Travel and French Kiss divers that are based in Malapascua. They've decided to help me and to help us to get all those data. So every day they were collecting data, they were sending me pictures, trying to see if it was the same animals or not. And with all the groups that I bring to Malapascua at least 2 or 3 times a year since 2015, we've at the end managed to get some results. So despite those observations that were made by the link, by the treasure shark link, what we've got there, we haven't got over thousands of observations, but we do have, within 478 sightings, within 622 dive, we do have 104 individuals sighted. So we know that now there is 104 sharks that are actually using that reef. So there may be probably a lot more. This is only what we can do and what we can see. But we do know that there is actually 104 individuals that were photo ID'd in 356 dives. So that's the first point of the results of our research. Within those 104 individuals, we've got 74 males, 40 of them were sexually mature, and 30 females were sighted. Only 21 of them were sexually mature. We do have new observations at every dive, which means that it's not because you're seeing a shark that you've been seeing a week before that you're not seeing a new one. So we got like new observations every day. There were 44 individuals that were recited quite often. In a lapse of time between the observations, it's 3 days. So it took us only 3 days to know that one shark was coming back to the same cleaning station. Some has made research and find out that there were sharks that were using the cleaning stations every day. We haven't got that chance because sometimes we use the cleaning stations number 1 when the shark is actually on cleaning station number 3. So this is also the limits of our research. But that's what we figured with photo identification. The population that appears to be in a good health because they have not so much runes nor hooks due to the human activities. And with the locals, years after years, they've been discovering new cleaning stations, which means that there is not only treasure sharks sighted at 4 cleaning stations that are known now, because there is a lot more actually. And the population of treasure sharks in the area should be underestimated according to what we know for now. What comes out from those research is that we really need a permanent local monitoring to estimate the site loyalty or not, and estimate the treasure shark population in the area. This is like the first goal of what we've started out there. So now I'm going to talk more about conserving a shark and supporting an island, because as I was mentioned previously, we do believe that shark ecotourism help the shark's conservation with the help of science. And so there is a functional ecotourism in Malapascua. And just to explain it to the people that are listening to us, if you were not aware of what happens in 2013, Malapascua Island were hit by a very, very strong typhoon, Yolanda, that completely destroyed the entire island. And it was very bad. There are thousands of people that died over there. But what figured after that is that they were, after a few days, the Malapascua had already received huge support from the local dive industry and tourism. And what it is important, it's because what I've put there, it's publication. One is made by Gallagher and Neil Hammerschlag. They're 2 scientists that works from the US. And they wrote a paper in 2011, which says that global shark currency may help actually the economic value of shark for ecotourism. And this is a perfect example of what happens to Malapascua, because the adaptation of the climate-related disaster that happened there due to Yolanda typhoon actually helped the locals to recover from those problems. Over a year, almost everyone has managed to rebuild their home and live on livelihoods. Tourists are still, sorry?
We have 1 minute left and it's time for Q&A. I just
okay. Sorry. So yeah. So okay. So no. So I was just saying that the treasure shark presence has helped the community of Malapascua to actually rebuild their entire life due to ecotourism. And Monachol is actually a very great example of shark tourism worldwide. Yet in September 2014, the province of Cebu amended an ordinance that protects various marine resources to now include the protection of shark species. Today, it's only applicable in the province of the Visayas. If I'm not wrong, this is what I've read so far. The biggest problem that happens now is to enabling fishermen to tap into the shark tourism economy, because it would be a quite big challenge. Without alternative income, it starts to stop people from fishing when they rely on it, especially in the Visayas. And currently, as I'm aware of it, treasure sharks are not protected in the Philippines like the whale sharks is, for example. And the discussion actually that I wanted to have with the 2 speakers that are with me today, as I'm not from the Philippines, is what can we do to actually reinforce the protection of these shark species in the area of the Visayas, according to everything that that are known now, and to help more actually the science and the citizen science in the island, to make sure that the treasure sharks will be the next shark species to be protected in the entire seas of the Philippines.
Okay, Steve, I'm so happy you asked that question, because our next speaker is one of the ones who has lobbied to have these sharks protected. And if I'm not mistaken, he will tell us more about it in a while. I think the bill has already been passed, and the treasure sharks are on this. And that's why it's very exciting to have everyone here, from you who is promoting shark education, and of course those conservationists and the next speakers that we're going to have who are on the ground here in the Philippines. So everyone is going to be learning from each other. And I just really want to thank you for sharing this presentation, because, you know, as a recreational diver, a lot of my friends and, you know, the people who go diving, they really misunderstand sharks, and shark education is definitely very important. I actually have a few questions for you. I will be asking some, just to remind everyone, if you have any questions, you can type it over in the comment section of our Facebook Live, or if you are here on Zoom, you can also chat, include it in the chat box, and we will answer that. So Stephen, I have a question. For those in the Philippines, how do we help and join the campaign that you just presented now?
Actually, it's to spread the word through the diving operators. I know there is lots of competitions between operators in Malapascua dive shops, but they've got to go over it. I think it's quite complicated for me to talk about that, because I'm not a local, I'm not there all the time, but from what I've seen, there have to be more serious discussions about that, and I believe that the local dive masters, as they are quite involved about that, they should also go further into the briefing that they give to their customers. They're not just only here to see treasure sharks, but then they can also be here to help treasure shark conservation through citizen science by collecting data. And I believe that with those, I don't remember if it's 28 or 36 dive shops that there is in Malapascua. If all of them were playing that game, the amount of data that were collected would be probably like a very first time in the world that we may get the amount of information regarding one species with the help of citizen science. So I hope that everybody, I wish and I hope that everybody holds the hands of each other for the name of the shark conservation, instead of the competitions with each dive shops. And yeah. I mean, this is my personal point of view, because this is how it works elsewhere, for example, in Egypt, and I do believe that competition in the thing, but sharks conservation is more important, because if the sharks goes to disappear, there is going to be no business for no one anymore. So
exactly, it should be a team effort from the local community, our visitors from abroad and around the country, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Because it's really such a treasure to have these sharks with us in our shores. And yeah, so one last question for you. How will these photo ID submissions of treasure sharks help conservation actions? Can you give us a few examples?
So getting those pictures will help us to broad a complete picture. I mean, getting those photo IDs will help us to know more the ecology of the treasure sharks in this area, specifically if we know that the animals that we just diving with is on the database and is actually still healthy. He's not dead, he's still alive, so he's moving. You know, it's not a shark that you're seeing and then you're not going to see it anymore. It happens sometimes for some animals, but then first of all, it's going to help you to know that you've got resightings over a week or a year, which helps you to understand if the population is healthy or not, or if it's been injured, or if the population has been damaged by fisheries that took place elsewhere in the North Visayas. And then it's also because science, the more science know, the better they're going to take actions to protect and to have words with governments or with jurisdictions that says, hey guys, listen, this is the last report we've got according to the information on the fields done by the citizen science. And this is that we're gonna go and move forward because we are in critical, I mean, the situation is dangerous or the situation is critical. So we're gonna go and move forward. So it's not just by taking pictures that you're protecting sharks. It's one step among others that's gonna help to get a complete understanding of the shark ecology, of that species ecology in the area, and to know if the population is still healthy or not.
Yes, thank you. It's basically the first step in, getting information, and, we and the scientists and conservation groups really do need everyone's help. So for all our guests watching in the dive industry, dive masters, those in Malapascua, or those who want to visit Malapascua, you have time to help. Okay, so without further ado, we just saw how important sharks are, especially the shark population internationally. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our next speaker. He is the director at Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines, and he's also a fellow at the Convention on Migratory Species. I have personally seen all the work Dr. AA Yaptinchay has put in the conservation of sharks, and I'm so excited to introduce him to you because we will be learning so much. So hello, AA, how are you?
Hi, Vanny. Good
Hello,
to be
welcome.
here.
Yes.
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. Give me a second. So I'll be talking about sharks and rays in the Philippines, particularly in developing a national policy for shark conservation. So thanks ADEX and DOT for having me here. But I've noticed in the comment of the post, sharks were identified as misunderstood marine mammals in the post. So I'd like to correct that, like for the millionth time already, that sharks are fish. And actually, the sharks as a group of fish can be still subdivided into different groups. So we have our true sharks, like what we're familiar with, uh, the fish looking true sharks, and we have what we call the wing sharks. They're more flattened in body shape. So these are called skates and rays. And we have deep water sharks also that doesn't look anything like sharks, called silver sharks or chimeras. So just to inform everyone, so generally I'll be referring to all these three groups as sharks in my presentation. So this infographic that I'm showing you is a bit complicated, but as you can see in the upper portion, we're comparing fish with the shark fish. Okay, so typically a fish we're talking about reproduction here and their capacity to increase their population. So if you look at a typical fish, they usually lay millions of eggs and multiple times a year. So that's what the upper portion is just showing you. But if you look at some sample shark species below, you can see that they have a very different life history strategy. So usually sharks are long-lived animals, but if you look at the column saying litter size, they don't produce millions of eggs, but they produce very few young. And they cannot do this usually several times a year, but some sharks can only reproduce every 3 years or more. So I'm showing you this because sharks are considered case selected species, meaning they're more similar to mammals than fish or other invertebrates. So this illustration shows you like an oyster can produce 500 million spawn every year, but like a gorilla can only produce one every 5 years. So sharks are more similar to mammals. So I'm saying this because sharks are considered as a fishery resource, but they are easily depleted because they don't produce that fast. Here in the Philippines, we're estimating that we have 200 species of sharks, meaning true sharks, wing sharks, and chimeras. A lot of them are still probably new species. We have like 50 specimens maybe that needs to be described further. But we're estimating around 200 or more species, meaning the more research we do, the more species we discovered. Actually, we're discovering a few more species over the years. Globally, we're fourth in shark biodiversity globally, next to Australia, Indonesia, and Japan. And in Southeast Asia, we're next to Indonesia in terms of number of species in sharks. And globally also, there's a species of a very rare shark called the megamouth shark. And fortunate, we're fortunate to have them in our waters, mostly in northern Mindanao. We're second in the world. We're with the most recorded, with the most records of the megamouth shark. Unfortunately, most of the specimens that we record are dead specimens caught by nets. Um, Other information about sharks in the Philippines include we should take pride in this. Second country in the world to protect whale sharks in the world. We did this in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. And through research work of WWF and LAMAVE, we'll be talking about this later, I'm sure. We're second in the world, if but I'm not updated with the most number of cataloged whale shark identified in our waters. I'm also proud to say that I think shark awareness in the Philippines has reached a certain high level, because I would say every Filipino would have a shark in their wallet or in their pockets, because we actually have the whale shark in our 100 peso bill. Um, Other facts, there was a basking shark outside of its range that was washed ashore in Masbate in 1996. We have a swell shark discovered in the Verde Island Passage in 2011. There was actually several documentation of great white sharks in the Philippines. We used to have bull sharks in Taal Lake, where we have the Taal volcano that exploded last year. The lake there used to have like bull sharks, but they're also gone. And other information pertaining to the use of sharks in the Philippines, and we have a site in the Bicol region where we've seen humans 1,500 years ago actually using sharks, because they found shark parts in their archaeological diggings. In 2018, this shark washed ashore in Dipaculao, Aurora. So, which is our first photo documentation and confirmation of the great white shark in our waters. So, I'm just pointing out that shark diversity is very diverse in the Philippines. But being found throughout the Philippines, as seen in the map, and they are considered as a fishery resource also. So most of our coastal communities would uh, catch them or hunt them for food. So these are examples of what has been transpiring in the Philippines. Some has stopped and some are still going on. But mainly we know sharks as being used for the shark's fin and for export. But in the Philippines, we have a dish called kinunot, where the main ingredient would be either a ray or shark meat, which is cooked in coconut milk. So it's a traditional dish here in the Philippines. We also use, for example, the tail of a manta ray or stingrays as a something people believe to ward off evil spirits. Um, in health sectors, shark liver oil and cartilage are used as supplements, and even the skin are used in leather for either furniture or bags. So they are used and they are utilized in the Philippines. And if you can check on the date here, it's January 8th, just a few days ago, that intercepted in Hong Kong were a ton of shark's fin uh, caught in the airport. Um, I'm not updated with the situation there. I think we haven't identified the sharks yet that were exported, but apparently they don't have the proper permits to do this, and they got seized. And this was taken from the internet, but shark fin is a big business, mostly going through Hong Kong and supplying China for the shark's fin soup. Um, the result is about estimated about 70 million, actually to about 200 million sharks are being killed for shark's fin soup alone. But as I said earlier, there are other uses of sharks in the Philippines. So as the threats, listing of threats that I can show you. Of course, we have the directed fishery, but we also have overfishing, not only of sharks, but a lot of commercial fish. In the Philippines, sharks are not in the top 10 of the commercially harvested fish. So they're actually not a priority of our government. But I would also like to take like the case with the megamouth, that they're caught as bycatch or incidental catch and mostly utilized in coastal areas as well. Threats to the environment, we have general habitat destruction and marine debris, particularly plastics and discarded fishing gear. We've identified here in the Philippines also that we have a problem in enforcing our law, which I'll get into in a bit. And since tourism is highly promoted in the Philippines, I want to talk about uh, unregulated tourism also, focusing on sharks. But again, these are threats identified in the Philippines, but of course, there are bigger global threats, including climate change, ocean acidification, dead zones in our oceans that we need to be concerned about. So having all these threats, this is from the IUCN Red List website. They classify threatened species, and as you can see, sharks are included there with 31% of all sharks and rays being threatened. So there are about 1,000 species of sharks and rays globally, and 31% would be roughly 300 or more species threatened with extinction globally. Why are sharks important? Typically, we see them as top predators, but if you look at interactions in different ecosystems, they can be apex predators, but they can also be mid-level predators in the reef. And for some species, particularly the plankton eaters, they are secondary consumers only. So it's not right to say that sharks are always top predators, because they do function in at different levels of an ecosystem. And what will happen if we don't have any more sharks? I said earlier, like tourism and shark diving is becoming important in the Philippines. So less income for us. Um, Losing them would mean upsetting the ecosystem, which will have a cascading effect and even affect food sources and fishery if that happens. So it has been proven once and again that sharks are more important alive, and mostly for tourism purposes, but they also have this intrinsic value for the health of our oceans and our ecosystems. So providing us the air that we breathe and food that we eat, and controls climate, etc. So shark tourism is very popular in the Philippines, with some of the more iconic species being shown to you today. We have like interaction with whale sharks in Sorsogon. We've heard about the pelagic treasure sharks in Monad Shoal in Cebu. And we have a few other sites, for example, Tubataha Reefs or Manta Bowl in Ticao Pass for manta rays. So we have a bunch of diving site. What we have right now in the Philippines, we don't have any specific law for shark protection, but all sharks are covered by our fisheries code. Um, and another administrative order which covers a few species of sharks. But maybe what's good is if CITES, I think we'll hear about this more later, which regulates international trade of sharks. Any species listed in CITES are automatically protected in the Philippines. So right before you are posters that we have. You can download them for free at our website. We have about 25 species that are present in the Philippines listed in CITES. And it is important because that means they are fully protected in the country. So that's about 20% of our estimated number of species in the Philippines. So we want to address this issue actually, uh, that not all sharks are conserved properly and still considered a fishery resource. In 2014, we started out a campaign because we found out that the Philippine Airlines was actually transporting dried shark's fin exported from the Philippines to Hong Kong. And when we started the campaign, the usual petition online activities, PAL actually agreed to stop uh, loading their planes and transporting shark's fin, um, which started this whole activity. And right now we're running a project. Actually, over the past few years, we've developed together with a group of like-minded NGOs and individuals and government. We work closely with government agencies to develop a 2020 conservation roadmap for sharks and rays in the Philippines. But we're done with 2020 and nothing happened much last year. So everything is delayed. But just to give you an idea what the 2020 roadmap means, it has a goal to conserve sharks throughout its range in the Philippines. And I'll talk about what conserved means in a bit, but it provides a future for the existence and of sharks in Philippine waters for the benefit of all Filipinos. Um, we're relying on, for this roadmap, conservation pillars, four, which includes research, communication, awareness, for example, engaging communities, particularly coastal communities and stakeholders, particularly in the fishery sector, and governance. So we mostly work with local governments and the national government on how we can improve shark conservation in our country. So I'd like to focus on policy development. Uh, as I said, sharks are just covered by our fisheries code, but nothing specific for all the sharks. So we did propose a shark bill, uh, which is entitled "An Act Regulating the Catching, Sale, Purchase, Possession, Transportation, Importation, Exportation of all sharks and rays and chimeras in the Philippines." And we're lucky to have the support of Congress and the Senate, because we have four champions there. They're named in front of you, which has filed the bill. So the bill is not a law yet. It needs to go through a few hearings, and we had just one in the lower house in December. So we're still pushing for this bill to pass to become a national law in the Philippines. But under this law, we want to address municipal fisheries and sharks because it's not only a commercial fishery concern. Of course, big time fisheries, it's important to us. And as I said, bycatch, mostly undocumented, needs to be addressed as well. And other consumer products, including beauty products, which from your lipstick to skin whitening lotions that uses um, shark oil. And we have some issues on tourism and captivity of sharks as well, which remains unregulated. So I said an issue would be implementation and enforcement of the laws. We have 25 shark species protected, but usually the government lacks enforcement capacity. So we're helping them, for example, identify sharks through manuals. We're providing training, etc. But one success we had is to promote the regulation of some tourism activities, not only with sharks, but other marine wildlife, including dolphins and whales and turtles. And this just passed in September 2020. It's entitled Rules and Regulations Governing the Conduct of Marine Wildlife Tourism Interactions in the Philippines, which regulates activities mostly for protected species, for land-based interaction, water-based interaction, either on a boat or while scuba diving, snorkeling, or skin diving, and even aircraft interaction. And what's written here would be some code of conduct, which either regulates an activity or prohibits an act. For example, like touching or chasing after or harassing uh, marine wildlife, including sharks. We've also included here zonations, which would include an interaction zone, the only zone that you're allowed to interact with a protected marine wildlife in. So they're all in this law. I'm not going to go into the details, uh, but our goal is for sharks to be conserved in the country. The threatened species needs to be fully protected. We understand that our coastal communities need to rely on our fishery resource, and for species that are not actually threatened, uh, if there's going to be fishery that's going to go on, it needs to be managed and it needs to be done in a sustainable way. And I think I'll segue for our next. We're promoting marine protected area. So, for example, the question earlier, how to protect the treasures in Monad Shoal is to work on it being a managed area, a marine protected area where fishing activities are regulated and limited. And not only there, since the sharks move around, we need actually to have a network of marine protected areas for some species. So I'll leave you with this slide. We're high on promoting education on shark as well. So what amigo sa iho, amigo sa tao is in Visayan, and it means like we should be friends to sharks because we'll also be friends to people. So thank you for listening. You can check us out on Facebook and our website. We have a bunch of materials there for that you may use for shark conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, AA. And before we move on to our next speaker, I believe that you have a video for us.
Yes, if we have time,
Yes. We are
please.
going to, yes, we're going to cue it now. So everyone, please
Thank
enjoy.
you.
More than 200 different species of sharks and rays call the waters of the Philippines home. Yet only a few species have received the protection they need to recover depleted populations. Many are still fished and overexploited, and most remain unregulated throughout the country.
The biggest threat to sharks and rays in the Philippines would be the fishery, with almost 200 species of sharks and rays in the Philippines, and them being present throughout the country in different habitats.
If you look at data, there are places that is as an amazing biodiversity, but every night 80,000 hooks are put in the water. So if a shark swims past the first 1,000 hooks, there are still 79,000 waiting for him. In some locations, habitat loss is a big problem as well. A lot of these sharks use mangrove forest to come and breed and reproduce and use as nursery. We are seeing a big loss of mangrove all around the county.
In addition to overfishing and habitat loss, pollution, ocean acidification, and climate change are contributing to the continued decline of sharks and ray populations in the Philippines. Conservation measures on a national level would help protect the most vulnerable species.
We would like to make it clear that when we say protection, it does not automatically ban fishing, trading, consumption, or any utilization of shark species. It should be in the context of science determining whether it's viable to take them out from the water, just to make sure that their numbers or stocks are at a level where they'll be able to perform or function their ecological role for a healthy marine ecosystem.
Recognizing these threats, stakeholders from the academe, NGOs, government, and businesses gathered to develop the 2020 Conservation Roadmap for Sharks and Rays in the Philippines. The plan maps out the opportunities and challenges to conserve sharks and rays in the country. The roadmap takes a comprehensive approach to propel shark and ray conservation forward in the Philippines, in the hope of finding the balance between human needs and the integrity of the Philippine marine ecosystem.
So the roadmap is a blueprint of what we envision shark and ray conservation to be in 2020. So it has different aspects. On governance, there's policies, there's communications and research, and community-based interventions.
Protein from shark and ray has been really important for Filipinos for the last centuries. But we realize that the fishery is not sustainable, and we need to find a way to transition out and protect this animal. And there are different ways to do it.
Tubataha Reef's natural park in Palawan, Philippines, spans 97,030 hectares and is home to 13 species of dolphins and whales, 600 species of fish, 360 species of corals, and 11 species of sharks. It is a national and global treasure.
The biggest success, and as we can see for Tubataha, there's the highest density of white-tip reef shark and gray reef sharks in the world, is because this place has been protected properly for 20 years. And we have a clear example, Tubataha Reef Natural Park, that is where most of the people come to see the big sharks and rays, and places like Malapascua and Donsol, they bring millions of dollars every year to the economy.
Ang Tubata parang tahanan na ng ano eh. Kumbaga sa kon sila ng dito na sila naniran dahil siguro nakita nila na magandang tira ng Tubata na hindi sila na-disturb tulad ng ibang lugar na daming mga fishermen o na-disturb sila. Kaya nandito mga pating, yun ang kagandahan siguro.
Tubataha is one of the very few pristine reefs in the Philippines. Sharks and rays are important in Tubataha because they're top predators and they help to control the population of other species, and they help to maintain the balance of this ecosystem. And they're not only ecologically significant to us, they're also significant economically because they bring in tourism revenues. A lot of tourists come here and they're very, very keen on seeing the sharks and the rays in the park.
In recognition to the uniqueness of sharks as a species, there needs to be a separate, a distinct law that recognizes the biological limits, the biological functions of sharks. That law looks at incentives, how do we govern trade, how do we govern fishing, and how sharks as a species will be protected in order for the communities to maximize benefit from it.
So when we talk about shark and ray conservation, it's not just about saving sharks and rays, but also about finding that balance between what humans need in terms of their livelihood and their lifestyles. Being able to use sharks at the point where they're able to recover. And right now, we're still in the process. We're in a journey to find out where that happy, balanced place is.
When implemented, the 2020 Conservation Roadmap for Sharks and Rays in the Philippines will show that sustainability and cooperation are key to conserve them, and ultimately, our seas and our future. To claim our right to a balanced and healthy ecology, we call on governments, advocates, businesses, and every single Filipino to support this roadmap and allow sharks their rightful existence in the Philippine seas.
Okay, that was very inspiring, especially for us Filipinos that, everyone can take part. And what's really nice is all the stakeholders from businesses to NGOs to the government is coming together. And thank you to our speakers and the advocates who are leading this initiative. We actually have a lot of questions, but we will save them for the Q&A session later because we want to give you more time. If you guys have more questions, please don't forget to type them up in the Q&A area of this Zoom or in the comment section of any of the Facebook Live on the DOT page or the ADEX page. Now, without further ado, let's hear from somebody who is the project leader of whale shark research and conservation projects representing the large marine vertebrates research institute of the Philippines. Let us welcome Ariana Agustines. Hello, Ariana.
Hi, Vanessa. Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
It's Ariana or Arena?
Ariana.
Okay, guys, let's welcome Ariana. Thank you.
Yes. So I'll share my screen now. All right. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, to this session. I'll be mainly discussing the role that marine protected areas can play in the conservation of sharks here in the Philippines. So as Vanessa mentioned, I'm the project leader for the Whale Shark Research Project for LAMAVE, and we are a Filipino nonprofit organization working for the conservation of marine megafauna and their habitats in the Philippines. And this is just a map of some of the past and present locations of our project sites. I've also been able to, through my work, able to engage with the local community and share with them our research and educate them about the marine environment. So I'll show you just a quick video of sharks and the shark diversity globally, but also focusing on the ones that we see here in the Philippines. I'm sure. Can you lower the volume? So that was just a little clip of some of the sharks we study at our study site and some of the research techniques that we use. And so I just want to share that, sharks have lived in our ocean for over 450 million years. And given that in that time frame, as AA and Stephen mentioned earlier in their talks, they play a very important ecological role in the environment, maintaining healthy oceans and also the balance in the marine ecosystems. Is it not? Is my slide, are my slides advancing?
We're on the slide with the Philippine map on it. Is this correct?
I'm trying to click. I'm sorry, let me just stop sharing my screen again.
No problem. Guys, we have a lot of engagements now, so you guys better be excited for the Q&A later. Okay.
Perfect. All right.
Perfect.
So, but Again, as AA and Stephen mentioned earlier, sharks and rays are in peril. They are one of the most threatened marine species. And this chart shows that the red, orange, and yellow segments of the chart are categorized as threatened in IUCN Red List, which comprises nearly like a quarter of the whole, and the gray area, which is roughly half of sharks and ray species, are data deficient. And so this raises concern over the possibility of sharks becoming extinct without us being able to fully understand their ecological role. And just as a little update, these stats are from a 2014 study, but the IUCN did a recent update of the assessment last December 2020, and the critically endangered category has actually increased to 11%, and the endangered category has increased to 18%. So this is, quite alarming. And right, again, going over threats. So globally, threats to sharks and rays, which include overexploitation through targeted fishing and bycatch, habitat destruction, pollution, climate change, unsustainable tourism, and illegal wildlife trade are increasing in intensity and scale. And as AA mentioned earlier, because of their conservative life history characteristics, such as slow to grow, late in sexual maturity, and have low reproductive rates, this makes them extremely vulnerable to these threats and results in a sharp decline of their populations. So a few of the solutions. So how can we manage these threats or mitigate and reduce their impact? One of the keys is to have a strong fishery policy that ensures they are being properly enforced and monitored, to support or create fishery independent livelihoods, to closely regulate and monitor the trade of these species, and to protect their critical habitats and home ranges. And so how can we use these critical habitats to protect sharks in the Philippines? By establishing effective marine protected areas. So this is a solution to addressing these threats, and MPAs are marine spatial planning goals that restrict certain activity in a given area and have clearly defined regulation and purpose. So in general, the aim is to increase the fish abundance, increase the fish diversity, and allow the fish to reach adulthood, all leading to productive marine habitat. The MPAs for shark conservation is a type of management strategy that, if it's implemented and designed correctly, is capable of protecting these certain species of sharks. But MPAs cannot just be random. They need to be species specific and have a defined objective. And we need to ensure that they don't become paper MPAs, which just waste our time and resources and also not protect target species. So effective MPAs for sharks are dependent on the overlap of the spatial protection and the animal's movements and critical habitats. So we need to consider the following parameters for effective MPA designation. One is that to be isolated, so to be separated by fished areas by habitat boundaries such as distance or depth. The other is to be well established or like have an old MPA. This allows for time to be able to accumulate the benefits of that MPA. And this is quite important for sharks because as they are long-lived species, it gives them enough time to rebuild their populations. And then also it needs to be of adequate size. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the larger MPAs are better. Small MPAs can also be effective in protecting certain critical habitats like breeding areas, feeding sites, and nursery grounds. And they can also protect species specific with species specific goals. And for the larger MPAs, they're able to protect a wide range of habitat for many shark species throughout the different life stages. and also the more pelagic sharks have a wider home range. So here, for example, on a national level, Palau National Marine Sanctuary is quite a good example where almost 80% of their exclusive economic zone is protected with a designated domestic fishing zone. And then on a barangay level or village level, the Sonok Marine Sanctuary located in southern Leyte also restricts fishing. So they ban fishing activities, but they allow other activities like snorkeling for tourism. So MPOs also need to be properly enforced. This would require adequate resources, such as financial capacity and manpower, and it must also be or aim to be cost effective, which might entail requiring improved surveillance technology. So effective spatial protecting for sharks depends on our knowledge of their ecology, their movement, and their biology and habitat use. And so we study these different sharks to understand these parameters using a variety of techniques. So to assess the abundance and biodiversity, we use baited remote underwater video systems or BRUVs and underwater visual surveys. And then to study their habitat, use, and movement, we employ satellite and acoustic telemetry. So this is best understood a real life example. And I'm happy that the Reef Natural Park does not need an introduction, but if you are divers and you've been lucky enough to visit Tupitaha, you know that it's a diver's dream, and I'm sure like a bucket list item, but it's also an example of a well-managed MPA. So Tupitaha is the largest no-take MPA in the Philippines, and it's been protected since 1988. And it is also roughly 100 kilometers from Cagayancillo, which is the nearest human settlement. So it's an undisturbed ecosystem, which is accessible by divers for only 4 months of the year, which makes it a perfect place to study sharks in their natural habitat. And so here in Tupitaha, we looked at shark biodiversity and abundance, their habitat use, and wide-scale movements. Oh yeah. And then I'll just show you a quick video again of summary of our results using BRUVs and underwater visual surveys.
Thank you very much, Ariana, for sharing your presentation and the videos. It's been such a great...
Wait, Vanessa, I'm not yet finished. I'll
oh, you're not yet finished?
No.
Okay, sorry. Please continue.
Yes, I will. All right, so that video was just a highlight of the results of our BRUVs and underwater visual surveys. And to point out, the results showed that Tupitaha hosts one of the highest abundance of gray reefs and white tips globally, and it shows the importance of actively managing MPAs to conserve reef-associated sharks, such as the white tips, gray reefs, nurse sharks, and the like. And then so this is the broad study that we did from 2015 to 2017, and we wanted to compare the abundance and species richness of reef-associated sharks between MPAs, which are highlighted in red, and open fishing zones, which are highlighted in green. And open fishing zones are areas where there's no defined fishery regulation. So this is the graph. The bars represent the elastic relative abundance, and it shows that MPAs have higher relative abundance in reef-associated species than in open fishing zones. And then so for habitat use and movement patterns, we deployed acoustic telemetry receivers in Tubataha and Cagayancillo. And so the tag, which is an example here in the photo, is attached to a shark and or manta ray, so different shark species and manta rays. And when the tagged shark swims within range of the acoustic receiver photoed here, it downloads the information and it stores that in the receiver. So this tells us how the sharks use the habitat, which helps better inform spatial planning for conservation managers. It also helps assess and measure the performance of marine protected areas. And this is just a quick summary of the movements detected by acoustic receivers from 3 different animals. So the red arrows represent the gray reef sharks, and the those little islands there comprise of the Tuataha atolls. So you see that the gray reef shark movements, they mainly stay within the park boundaries. And then the manta and tiger sharks that we've tagged, they had movements outside of the park boundaries to Ariana Reef, about 100 kilometers away. And there was actually movement between Ariana Reef and Tuataha Reefs of those 2 animals. So some of those species, travel between protected areas and non-protected areas, which exposes them to fisheries and increases their likelihood of capture. So this highlights the need to zone Cagaya and Celius MPA to protect these known key habitats for these animals, as we know that they're moving between protected and unprotected sites. And then we also use satellite telemetry to investigate species with a known longer range movement, hoping to identify any migratory corridors or important passageways. And this is an image of a tagged tiger shark with tracks highlighted in green. So you can see here, Jesse Beasley Reef is part of the Tuataha Atolls, which is the location of the tag, and you can see that it's moving throughout the Sulusi and into like the Zamboanga area. So it's leaving the park boundaries. And, this suggests that Taha as an NPA may not be sufficient enough to eliminate the threats to these more mobile species. And an interesting note is that the white circle below is actually a previously tagged whale shark that was found dead, and the tag was found in a fishery. And then you can see that the green lines of the tagged tiger shark also have high activity within that area. So it's quite concerning, that it overlaps with those fishery activities as well. And then this is another example of satellite telemetry on the whale shark. The different colors represent the different tagged individuals. And the whale sharks are very mobile species. They move all around the Sulu Sea, with one even moving to the Pacific Ocean. And some of our more recent satellite telemetry data have also recorded the sharks traveling to international boundaries to Malaysia, Indonesia, and Taiwan. So while Tuataha may be ecologically important for whale sharks, they may not be as significant providing protection for these highly mobile species, as whale sharks are mostly seen passing by Tuataha. So based on the satellite and acoustic telemetry data and in combination with other research methods like the BROVs and the underwater visual surveys, we can understand the movement of particular sharks and rays, so where they spend their time, and know how those areas can receive adequate protection. And we can also be able to identify habitats that are crucial for the survival of these species. So what are some of these high valued habitats that would be good candidates for receiving protection? Some of these are feeding grounds, like in Palawan and Southern Leyte for the whale sharks, cleaning stations, like in Cow and Malapascua for the threshers and manta rays, and nursery and pupping grounds, for example, for like Bonsol, the Boho Sea, Baha Reefs, and Apa Reefs Natural Park. So in conclusion, with protection, adequate size, and good governance and management, MPAs can be a valuable tool for the conservation of sharks and rays. MPAs need to be designed with species in mind and to consider the ecology and any overlaps in fishing activities. So Tubaha exhibits exceptional management and enforcement, and it hosts one of the highest diversities and densities of reef sharks worldwide. And it's sufficient to provide protection for these reef sharks, but may not be as adequate in providing protection to cover all sharks and rays. So the conservation of sharks requires different approaches and interventions. In general, these are the suggestions: to replace destructive fishing gear or modify fishing gears with high bycatch. As I mentioned during this presentation, creation of new MPAs or networks of MPAs, or redesign MPAs to effectively protect megafauna and protect marine corridors, as well as to have alternative livelihoods to fishermen to reduce fishing pressure and illegal fishing. And it's important also to have community buy-in and participation, as well as have active stakeholder engagement. So how can you help? As Stephen mentioned earlier, you can become a citizen scientist. So documenting the different sharks that you see, their presence, their behavior, can help us understand their ecology and their movements. So for example, citizen science has helped us identify the 23 shark species in Tubataha. So for the searches for particular species that have distinct markings, such as the whale sharks and the manta rays, photoed below, taking a photo of the area highlighted in red is sort of like their identification marker. And so also reducing seafood consumption as it contributes to overfishing and unsustainable fishing practices. So there's this movement by the Fish Free February charity. And so there's the link there that you can access to take the pledge to go fish free this coming February, or just visit the website and learn more about it. We also have a toolkit for you to share with your friends and family, and to learn more about the effects of overfishing and like. And then also be a conscious consumer. So know if you do eat fish, know what kind of fish you're eating, know where it comes from. This also includes, buying sustainable products, supporting local livelihood projects, and be an ecotourist. So when you travel to these places, make sure that you make well-informed decisions, selecting a destination, and also selecting tour operators that practice sustainable business practices. Respecting the local and national guidelines, which AA mentioned, and it's also a brief infographic here for your viewing, and to volunteer or donate to shark conservation research efforts. So with that, thank you very much for listening. It's that we use or joining the Expedition Shark trips to Tubataha. Do get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariana. And thank you, Stephen and Dr. AA as well. I'm not sure if you're seeing the comments, but we have different stakeholders, from photographers, volunteers, dive operators, and anyone who wants to be a part. So may I ask the three of you, if you can go over to the ADEX page under this live link, we are getting questions. If you can share either your website or any poster on how they can take action after hearing all your presentations. So we can do this after we close the live, but we are getting a lot of questions on people, taking action and joining your cause. So thank you very much. With that, let's move on to our first question. Are you guys ready? Yeah, so if you guys can unmute when you guys are going to answer, and I'll direct some questions to you guys. So first, maybe this can either go to Ariana or Steven. If any of you have this data, has the months of COVID-19 isolation been able to increase the shark population? Perhaps let's start with Ariana.
So currently, we have suspended all of our operations, our field operations, in our research site, so we're unable to monitor the movement of sharks and monitor their presence. So it's quite unsure. But in terms of COVID, I'm sure that many people are struggling, especially fisher folk. So I'm not sure if that leaves it open to unsustainable fishing practices, if enforcement has also been held back due to the certain restrictions and lockdowns. So there might be less monitoring efforts as well. But I think we'll have a better understanding maybe when we return back to our research sites and continue the monitoring. Continuing our monitoring efforts.
Thank you for that. Stephen, do you have information on your end, or have your operations been halted as well due to the pandemic? Sorry, I think you're still on mute. Maybe we can unmute for a bit. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah, I've got no information regarding the Philippines because I haven't got the chance to travel there last year. But regarding 3 other destinations, like in Mexico, in Playa del Carmen, the bull sharks over there are still there. So they still migrate. The migrations are still in, regardless what COVID-19 has done. It's kind of the same story in the Bahamas now. So sharks are either way. I mean, they're doing their migrations, but they're back seasonally. So it hasn't changed their migrations. And in the Red Sea with the oceanic white tip sharks, it's quite different because we figured that the aggregations of those sharks around the boats and around the reefs were made because of the human impact. We triggers them with all our humans activities. And as they are pelagic, open ocean animals, once there is something noisy, smelly, or anything, they just aggregates around it. So this is kind of why we've got them around the boats in the Red Sea. And as there were no customers last year, the sharks are not there. It doesn't mean that they vanished. They're just in the natural environment, away from reefs, because they've got nothing else to do but being cleaned up there in cleaning stations. But they feed in their own ground in offshore. So that's what we've figured.
Okay, so thank you for that information. We are running out of time, but I have one last question for Dr. AA. Hi, AA. Okay, so I saw that shark oil is used for whitening products. Would you know if all whitening products use shark oil, or are we only looking at for a particular ingredient, so that we can avoid purchasing those brands who use shark oil? And if you could add not only whitening products, but the specific thing that we should look at to be good consumers. Okay.
Well, I'm not familiar with the whole range of beauty products out there, but one particular brand which I showed in my slides keeps on promoting their products containing shark oil. So shark oil from shark liver extracted usually from deep water sharks for a particular species, for example, dog sharks. And for example, they have a fishery of that in Limasawa Island and some other parts of the Visayas. These are extracted and bought as raw materials by the manufacturers. So for that specific product, they promote it as such. I haven't seen any study proving that it would have such an effect uh, on people's appearance or beauty. Um, but the same shark oil is being used as a health supplement also, uh, for omega fatty acids and stuff like that. Uh, so there's a whole range of products. Some would label them properly, and as you've seen, some even promote it, like they have billboards on EDSA promoting shark oil in their products. But we need to look again, as I mentioned in my presentation, uh, where the source is, what types of sharks are being used. We're mainly concerned for full protection for threatened shark species. For example, dog sharks are not included here. But if they are going to be harvested for such products, we need to ensure that this is managed and done sustainably. So we're not saying like ban all shark products, and we should not utilize sharks for fishery. But if we're going to do that, it has to be managed, labeled properly, etc.
Much AA for sharing that information. Again, everyone, we are getting questions on getting the copy of your presentations, but if you could just go to the ADEX link, and our speakers will be posting their websites or information there. Yeah, so we actually have a few more minutes, and we can accommodate one last question. This one is, what about Oslub whale sharks? What is the position of the local authority regarding whale shark interaction? Should tour operators promote a slub to local and international markets? Perhaps we can ask either AA or Ariana to answer this in terms of a local aspect, and Stephen for international. Um, who would like to take it first? AA or Ariana?
I'll
Okay.
I'll speak first, Ariana, if you allow me. So as I say, it would depend on, like, we wouldn't want to generalize. This is quite a difficult question to answer, but please note that whale sharks are actually considered threatened species. They're actually in the category of endangered, meaning all actions we take needs to ensure that the sharks are protected. I mean, they're fully protected in the Philippines, but any action we take as a conservation program needs to ensure that the sharks would thrive, and any form of threat, direct, indirect, or minimal or major threats, should be eliminated. And if I assess this properly, activities that promote feeding, changing behavior and movement, for example, increasing uh, interaction of individuals that usually don't aggregate, uh, would increase the chance of well, decrease the chance of, or increase the threats to these animals. So as an organization, and I would also like to say that in the tourism guidelines, feeding of any protected species for tourism is not allowed. It's actually banned under the new law. So we're not supporting such activities or the promotion of such.
Thank you, AA. Ariana, is there anything you would like to add to what he just shared?
I think AA summarized that very well. For I think here in the Philippines, there are other sites and locations where you can view whale sharks in their natural habitat, which is always one of the aims of ecotourism. And this, is doesn't pose a threat to sharks, and may have more minimal impacts. So always that natural encounter is should be preferred over any manipulated ones. And yeah, there are very good tour operators, dive operators that offer these sustainable business practices.
Okay, thank you so much. And if from an international perspective, Stephen, would you like to share something about this?
I think AA and Ariana has said everything actually. I just wanted to say that like scuba divers of 21st centuries are more consumers than adventurers, you know. So they're buying their scuba diving or their adventure like they buy their sandwich at a shop, you know. So of course promoting such activities like feeding whale sharks, as AA said, of a species that never aggregates, only when they feed actually, and this is main med. I've been there, I've experienced it twice, just because I wanted to make myself my own opinion of it. And no, I'll never propose it to my customers. And I don't like Ariana says, there is other places in the Philippines or elsewhere where you can see whale sharks in a more respectful way for these animals, actually. So let's go through ecotourism more and respect of the animals, I think.
Okay, thank you everyone, and I hope all of you have learned more about how you, in whatever industry you're in, to take part of shark conservation. We had the pleasure of having 3 amazing speakers, all from taking different perspectives and sharing information. If you guys want to join their projects or reach out to their cause, please go and check out the links that they will be posting on the Facebook Live, and you may see how else you can, take action and be a part of this. During this talk, we spoke about how ecotourism is very important, especially here in the Philippines, being a coastal community. I'd like to invite everyone that at 12 o'clock, we are going to have another talk that I will be hosting as well. We have 3 different speakers speaking about liveaboard diving in the Philippines. And it's basically the same step of taking the initiative to do ecotourism, which is much better, and to get to know the oceans that we love. So thank you again to our speakers, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.